What is something scary that has happened to you that you cannot explain rationally? Story 1. We own two flats on the 7th and 8th floors of a building where I live. The only method to get from one apartment to the other is to leave the apartment, take the elevator or the stairs, and go into the other one. We ran out of ice cream upstairs one night, and my mom urged me to grab some from the freezer downstairs. I took the keys to the 7th floor apartment, but no one was home because it was dinner time. I strolled into the dark and saw someone sitting on the couch. I switched the light and saw that it was my dad. It felt a little strange, but I just went to buy the ice cream and asked him if he had a key to lock up. No answer. I shrugged and thought, well, he must have one if he came in and locked the door behind him. I went back upstairs and saw my dad eating dinner. I was scared and inquired how he got up here so quickly. Everyone informed me that he had been here the whole time. I told them that wasn't possible because I had just seen him downstairs, but they didn't believe me. I never go down there by myself now. Story 2. A few years back when I was still in high school, I spent a weekend alone at home. One day after school, I was going home and believed I noticed an old lady in white clothes peering through the window of my sister's room as I drove by. I thought that was dumb, so I went into the room to see what it really was, but I couldn't find anything. I almost forgot about it until that night when a very worried and panicked neighbor called me to say that an old lady was pacing back and forth in my sister's bed. I still don't know what it was, and I haven't seen anything like it since. That sounds like something from a horror movie. It's creepy that you spotted her initially and didn't think anything of it, but then your neighbor called you in a panic over the same thing without you knowing? That gives me the shivers. The tempo is what really bothers me. It's so human and restless. It was like she was waiting for something or someone. The old lady in white story is already a popular ghost story, but now it's backed up by two reliable witnesses who saw it happen on two different times on the same day. I'd sleep with the lights on for at least a month if this were my residence. Story 3. I used to work on old buildings to keep them in good shape. When it wasn't available to the public, I worked in a historic house museum. It was part of a complete historic site. There was a visitor's center with offices, and then the home was approximately half a mile along a gravel road in a forested area. I worked with a crew sometimes, but most of the time I was alone. I was working alone on a winter day when it was quite overcast and dark to get ready to fix some electrical work on the outside of the house. I walked inside and turned off the circuit that powered the whole property. Then, I tried it. It wasn't on. I locked the doors and walked outdoors to do some work. After about an hour, I got off the ladder and walked around the house. Then, one of the lights inside the home turned on. I started to stress out, but I thought maybe someone was just playing a joke on me. I called the visitor's center on my walkie-talkie to make sure that the sole other person working that day was still there and hadn't left. I also made sure that all the keys to the house were there. At that point, I panicked and rushed the half mile to the office. I made my coworker come back with me to see what was going on, but when we got to the house, the light went off again. The bulb was still warm though, the circuit was still off, and all the doors were still locked. It still makes me shiver to this day. Story 4. I had a cat named Buster when I was 6. Buster was really my stepdad's cat, but I said he was mine because I'd never had a cat before. In short, Buster despised me because a tiny kid always caressed and cuddled him. He did everything he could to stay away from me. He was also an outdoor cat, so he spent most of the day outside and then came inside at night. Buster didn't come home one night. I was anxious because we typically fed him at night. There were also a lot of coyotes in our area. My parents were being a little secretive about Buster's disappearance, but I didn't get the hint. Buster jumped onto my bed that night as I was falling asleep. He lay down next to my head and let me pet him till I fell asleep. To be honest, I was astonished because he had never done this before. The next morning, I proudly strolled downstairs and told my parents that Buster now liked me because he slept in my bed all night. My parents stared at me with curiosity and sat me down at the breakfast table to tell me that they had found Buster's body in the alley behind our house the night before. They feared a coyote had been bothering him, but he was dead, so he couldn't have slept in my bed that night. I still want to imagine that Buster just wanted to say goodbye and thank me for loving him the only way a youngster knows how. Story 5. We have a decent-sized horse boarding business, and when we initially started it, we used to check the beds as a family. Bed check was merely making sure the lights and fans were off and checking the horses for injuries and blankets in the cold. We had just come back from eating out, and it was a fall night with no moon. When we got out of the truck, this big light gray thing rose up and ran out into our meadows. It was about the same size as a single cab pickup truck. It didn't make any noise except for when it touched the ground as it ran. The only other thing that made it real for us was the horses that night that cried and ran across the paddock it had jumped into. That night, we counted all the horses twice, and none of them were missing. I haven't seen it again yet, and I hope I never do. Or at least there is a good reason for it. Story 6. I lived alone in a wonderful small studio apartment behind a house in a really nice area when I was in college. I wouldn't mind walking at night. There was a 24-hour McDonald's and a 7-Eleven that I would walk to, usually between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. because I was a huge night owl. After writing an essay at 2 in the morning, I realized I was hungry but didn't have anything quick to make. So I decided to stroll to the 7-Eleven and get a pie or anything. But as soon as I opened my door, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. My pulse started racing, I started shaking, and so on. I told myself that this was crazy and strolled out to the street planning to go anyhow, but that was as far as I got. I was scared for no reason I could think of, but it didn't make me feel any less scared. I went back inside and had some dry cereal. The next day, I heard of a gang of drunk guys who were causing trouble outside the 7-Eleven crossroads. They had beaten up someone from my university. I can't explain why, but I'm sure something horrible would have occurred to me that night if I had ignored that sensation and gone anyhow. Story 7. It's probably too late, but here goes. I worked the graveyard shift at a hotel in Albuquerque. I had been talking to the security guard when he asked if he could get a ride home. Instead of waiting 30 minutes for my shift to end, I just left, and left my boss a note saying I had to leave early because my brother was stuck outside of town and needed me to get him, which was a total lie on my part, but I needed a good excuse to leave early. I dropped the security guard off at his place and then went home and went to sleep. I wake up a few hours later to my phone ringing. It's my brother, and he says he's stuck outside of town and needs me to come get him. I tell my brother the lie I told my boss and how strange it is that he called me. He replies that's not strange. When I arrive there, he will show me what's strange. When I get there, I ask him what's wrong. He holds his phone up to my ear and plays a message he got that morning when he woke up. The voice sounded a little like a computer, but largely it was just disturbing. It states, "You're stuck." That scared us both. I never found out where the call originated from. The weirdest and creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. Story 8. I'm a little late, but who cares? I was in first grade and was playing with a friend at recess. I was playing DS on the pavement while he shot some hoops outside. I recall him asking me whether he could shoot from halfway across the floor. I told him he could try, but he probably wouldn't be able to do it while gazing at my DS. My dad suddenly asked me what I mean, and when I glance up, I'm sitting on the carpet in my living room talking to him, and it's dark outside. I was in the same place, playing the same game, at the same level, and in the same exact spot in the level. That night, everything went on as usual, and I didn't tell anyone at the time, but looking back, it's extremely creepy. For a long time, I believed it was a dream, but it didn't feel like one, and I don't remember dreams very well. That's a full-on glitch in the Matrix moment. One moment you're conversing to your pal on the blacktop, and the next you're in your living room at night with no time in between. No walking home, no memory gap, just a quick change of scene. What makes this even more disturbing is that nothing else had changed. The same DS, the same game, the same point in the level, like your save file in real life simply loaded a new map. It's not a blackout or a dream. It's more like reality skipped a frame and sent you somewhere else. If that had happened to me in first grade, I would still be thinking about it. Story 9. In 1975, I was flying an Army helicopter in the dark at Fort Hood, Texas for night training. I was flying down a draw with a tiny seasonal creek in it, which was the new way to hide the plane from Russian radar. I was flying the plane while my co-pilot was looking at the map. We were flying low and slowly from tree to tree. Suddenly, I knew for sure that I had to do an emergency climb, and I did it virtually straight up. As I took the guts out of the plane and pointed my nose up to the stars in my chin bubble, I saw the plexiglass of my chin bubble pushing the leaves of a cottonwood tree to the side. My co-pilot and I looked at each other with startled eyes and the realization that we had just barely evaded death. We were now a few hundred feet above the canopy. He asked me, how did you see that tree? I never told him I didn't because I don't know how to explain it. I flew helicopters for 37 years without any accidents, and I still can't explain what occurred that night. Story 10. I lived in a two-story farmhouse 7 years ago. It was built in 1908, thus it was both big and old. I was placing clothing in a small, disused bedroom and packing them. I was wearing my MP3 player, and the last time I looked, it said it had three-fourths of its battery life left. I was on my fourth trip or so and carrying a bunch of clothing on hangers. I thought the closet was empty too, so I said, "Great, I'll just hang them back up in there." This closet was like a second room. The door was short and shiny and made of wood. The area was 3 times as long as it was wide and had wooden floors. Even though I'm sure it was fresh 100 years ago, the lacquer still smelled. I ducked all the way inside and thought, what a strange place to be. Then the music got louder and shifted to something that wasn't music. It was like, I don't even know, quick nonsense, quick electronic chatter. It terrified the snot out of me. I flew right out and saw that my player was dead. I'm a reasonably logical person. That MP3 player has shown greater battery life than it really had previously. And maybe the sounds were a sign that anything was wrong before it shut down. I don't really believe in ghosts, but I have to tell you, it stunned and scared me to my very core. For an hour after, my skin felt like it was electrifying. I never felt at ease in that room again. Story 11. I realize I'm a little late, but I have a fantastic tale for this. My family lived in our old house about 6 or 7 years ago. This was our second house in Ohio. The first one was only a few streets away from the second one. One night, my mom woke me up and was acting really scared. She took my brother, who was about 5 at the time, and instructed me to go outside. My dad tried to calm my mom down when we all got outdoors around 4 in the morning. He asked her what was wrong, and she told him that she had a dream that we would all die from carbon monoxide poisoning if we stayed inside. After that, my dad told her that all the detectors were working great, so we went back inside. We didn't smell anything, and the detectors didn't go off, so we went to bed. Before we went to school the next day, my mom was watching the news. The first tale of the day was about a family in the area who had to leave their home quickly because of a carbon monoxide leak. That could have been a coincidence, but then the news channel displayed the residents. We just moved out of the house we used to live in. I have a few stories about my family that are quite supernatural, but this is the shortest one, to be honest. 12 stories. My grandma reported that when my grandpa died, she could feel someone getting into bed with her almost every night. We didn't believe her. I was trying to fall asleep while watching TV in the living room one night when I heard footsteps in the hallway going to my grandma's room. I looked out into the hallway and didn't see anyone for about a minute. The TV shut off right after the footsteps ceased. I stayed awake for another hour or so, but after that, I didn't hear anything. Story 13. My parents acquired the house I grew up in when it was about 100 years old. I lived there until I was 16. I remember seeing a girl that was pink and see-through for as long as I can remember. Pam was what I always called her. I still remember her very well, even though I lived in that place 10 years ago. When I talked about Pam, my dad got a little weirded out. Finally, when I was 13, my mom placed me in therapy because I kept bringing her up. I basically stopped talking about Pam and got on with my life to keep my folks from thinking I was insane. That was until my parents decided to sell the house when I was 16. 2 weeks before we moved into our new house, I was sleeping when Pam woke me up by standing in my doorway and pointing to the bathroom across the hall. Pam only responded, "Look, my mom." When I turned to check who she was pointing to, I saw a woman hanging from a chain in the bathroom. I recalled that the woman seemed like she had been hanging there for a while. Then, all of a sudden, her boot slipped off and I woke up. I hurried into my parents' room to tell them what happened, and my mom looked unhappy because I was talking about Pam again after not saying anything about her for years. I decided it was just a bad dream and went back to bed without any additional problems. Story 14. I was sitting on the couch with my boyfriend when I heard the words, "I love you." My boyfriend then added, "I love you too." I was very perplexed since I hadn't spoken "I love you." My mouth was shut. I recall hearing and feeling the vibrations of the words and sounds being spoken, but I didn't do it, and he didn't do it either. It sounded like a woman's voice. It sounded like it came from directly in front of my face, but there was no one outside the window or in the room with us. It was really scary. I still think about it. That's just plain scary. You and the other person can both hear a disembodied feminine voice saying, "I love you," right in front of your face. That's not just a sound, it's an interaction. The fact that you could feel the vibrations as if you were the one talking made it extra scarier, as if whatever it was took over your voice for a short time without utilizing your body. And what about the time? You said it perfectly, and your guy answered as if it were part of the conversation. When something like that happens, you start to question if you had a malfunction in reality, saw a ghost, or something else we don't even have words for yet. Story 15. I got home from class at 11:30 on October 20th, which was a week ago tomorrow. No one else was home. I stayed home for a while, but by 2:30 I was so tired that I couldn't stay awake. I set a timer on my phone for 20 minutes and lay down in bed because I'm a lazy person. I fell asleep fast, but after about 5 minutes, the door to my bedroom opened and I panicked for a second before my dog got up on my bed and lay down next to me. I went back to sleep. I woke up right away after 5 more minutes of sleep because I was sure there was someone behind me, adjacent to my bed. I thought it was my mom, who would probably be furious because I was sleeping in the middle of the day. I woke up and whirled around in one motion, but no one was there. Strange. I looked at my phone and saw that I still had 8 minutes to sleep. I fell back asleep, but my phone woke me up. My mom called. She told me that my great aunt had died at 1 o'clock. She had been in the hospital for a week after having a stroke like episode. Then, my mom stated she knew my aunt was going to die that day because she had seen a wraith, a ghost that normally warns of someone dying, that morning. I don't believe in any of it, even though my mom is Scottish and very superstitious. She told me that she walked into my room that morning to see if I was still asleep before taking my brother to school. There was a wraith next to my bed that she saw. My brain is messed up. Story 16. I used to go to my grandparents' house a lot with my sister and cousins when I was a kid. There is a mother-in-law apartment attached to my grandparents' house, so we always played there while the adults talked in the main house. We found a small key in the flat and played hot and cold with it one day. Someone was hiding it, but they dropped it by accident and it fell under the basement door. When I opened the door to grab it, I saw a man I didn't know standing at the bottom of the steps. He had a lot of things in his arms, like he had gone through my grandparents' cellar. My grandparents were hoarders, so their basement was full of things they either forgot about or put in storage, some of which were worth a lot. He roared at me, "Go back upstairs, kid! Go!" I was so scared that I raced right into the main home to alert my parents. My dad went down to the basement to look, but he didn't locate anyone. They all still say I made it up, but my sister and cousins say it's genuine too. About 5 years later, both of my grandparents died, so I helped my dad clear out their basement. It turns out they were missing a lot of things. I haven't been back to the house since. Story 17. My story was more like a malfunction in the Matrix, but it was still extremely scary. I don't believe in a lot of paranormal things, but something happened a few years ago that I can't explain in a logical way. My dad picked me up from the airport, we got in the car, and we drove home. Then I recalled that I had left my small bag in the airport bathroom, so we drove back, parked our car in a guarded, multi-level parking lot, and locked it, even though it locks itself after 30 seconds. When we got back, we found a small basket of raspberries on the driver's seat. My dad was seated there 4 minutes ago, so we had no idea how they got there. He didn't buy them, and I didn't bring them with me. There was only one way into the parking lot, and a parking guard was there to watch it. He said that no one came or went while we were gone. This anecdote is now famous in my family, yet no one can explain it. I apologize for my English. It's not my first language. Story 18. This keeps happening, but just while I'm home alone. About 5 months ago, I returned home from work at 10 p.m. To get into the living room, you had to walk past the basement stairs. I did this without looking straight down at them, but I could see them clearly. There was a big brown head at the bottom of the stairs that was opening and closing its jaws. It caught up with me after I'd taken approximately 5 steps past the stairs. Then I was terrified that it was a person in my basement. I asked a friend to come over and she came. We didn't find anything down there. Nothing had been moved and all the doors were secured. A few months later, I was watching TV upstairs before work. In the basement, I heard a thud that sounded like something had been tossed across the room. I stopped for a second, glanced around, and realized that all my dogs were in the same room as me. I contacted my friend again and instructed her to stay on the line while I looked around the basement. Nothing was moved and all the doors were secured. I heard the noise. It sounds like someone is throwing something big and heavy at the wall, about 5 more times, but I still don't know what it is. I haven't seen the face again, but I constantly feel like someone is watching me while I'm in the kitchen, which is at the top of the stairs. Story 19. From 1990 until 1993, he was stationed in Erlangen, Germany, but lived off base in Nuremberg. My wife, 2 daughters, and I lived in a condo on Dusseldorfer Strasse. When my oldest daughter was 3 years old, she would regularly run into our room crying and saying there was a monkey in her room. It was hard to understand her or her concern because she didn't have any monkey or ape toys. Their bedroom and ours were across the hall from each other, and we could look right into their bedroom from ours. I was reading in bed one night when I saw something move out of the corner of my right eye. I thought one of my kids might be awake, so I went to their room, but they were both asleep. I went back to bed and read my book. I spotted movement again, so I looked over to their room from my bed. That's when I saw what seemed like the outline of a child walking into the bedroom where my girls were sleeping. I jumped out of bed and made it to their room in about 4 jumps. Nothing. Both of my daughters were asleep. This was the middle of my tour, so we all slept in our room for the next year and a half. Story 21. Night in the winter. I walked to a park in my town and noticed a man sleeping on the ground. I didn't thought to call an ambulance even though it was really cold outside. I'd never seen him before, so I just stood there and watched him sleep for a minute before moving on. A week later, I heard in the news that he perished that night from the cold. The article said his name and that he had been homeless for a while. I felt bad about him, but I gradually forgot about him. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail from a local hospital that was addressed to him. It turns out that he used my address when he was at the hospital for whatever reason. I became white. That's one of those times that is both sad and really strange. First, the human side. You met someone on the last night of their life, and you'll always wonder what would have happened if you had called for aid. Then, months later, it seemed like he reached back from the dead through that letter and linked his narrative to yours on purpose or by mistake. It's strange that he provided the hospital your address. It feels personal, even if it wasn't. It was like you were unintentionally a part of his last chapter, and this was the postscript you never asked for. Story 21. During my winter breaks in college, I worked at a pizza shop in a small town. I was good friends with a married couple who worked extra hours on the side to make ends meet. We were telling scary stories one time, and they told me about one that had happened only a week before. The wife had been visiting her sister in the country all night when a big snowstorm hit. She was driving home and the roads were slick and she couldn't see very well. It got so terrible that she didn't even see the railroad crossing until the lights started flashing, and the gate almost hit her car. She was lucky that she was able to stop just in front of the tracks before the train came rushing by. When she went home, she was still disturbed up and told her husband about how close she came to getting hit by a train and how the gate almost fell on her car's hood. The next morning, her husband informed her he wanted to show her something. They drove out back toward her sister's house until they reached the railroad crossing. There was only an old-fashioned sign at a crossing. There were no gates or lighting. Story 22. I didn't do this, but I witnessed it happen, and it made me doubt my lack of confidence in the supernatural. The last time I was in New Orleans, I took a couple of friends to the Marie Laveau Voodoo Museum. My buddy Jessica didn't like it very much. We were walking back to the Airbnb apartment we had rented later that day when we saw a house with one of those historic place inscriptions on it. That house used to belong to Marie Laveau's father. Jessica is standing in front of the home and screaming about how bad she felt the museum was. Her brand new Galaxy S5 flew out of her hands and hit the ground about 5 feet away, completely breaking it. I was watching her when it happened. She didn't trip or flail her arms around like crazy. There was no way to know why her phone would have jumped like that. It wasn't simply scraped up a tiny bit like it had been dropped. It seemed like it had blown up from the inside. Story 23. When I was younger, a friend's house burned down and his family relocated across the street to a house they rented for a while. The basement of the rental house wasn't done, so we middle schoolers decided to utilize it to ride skateboards and scooters. So after one night of skateboarding, we go upstairs to watch horror movies and fall asleep. I think his dad and sister were at their grandparents' house for the night, so they weren't home. We were almost asleep when we heard something hit the concrete floor of the basement, pretty hard. Being dumb teens, we went to check it out. When we open the door to the basement and look down, we only see a skateboard floating in the air. We wait and watch for a few seconds, and then it falls abruptly and extremely hard. We packed up our stuff and ran back to my house, as you could expect. That night, not much sleep happened. Soon after, his family moved out, and we try to stay away from that place as much as we can. Story 24. There's basically only one thing I have that I can't properly explain, other than it just happened by chance. About 10 years ago, when I was 18 or 19, I woke up in the middle of the night with a terrible pain in my side near my hip. It stayed for around 20 to 25 minutes before it finally went away. I was able to go back to sleep and everything was fine. Few of days later, I learned that my grandma had fallen and broken her hip that same night, just before I woke up with my discomfort. That was definitely a that's strange moment. Story 25. I can't believe I really have a narrative for this. I had a lot of trouble falling asleep when I was a kid, and I usually went to bed very late at night. That's how my mom has always been. My mom told me that she heard something at night and wanted me to stay up a little longer to hear it too. I did because it was July. It's about 1 a.m. that night. She advised me to sit in the living room and listen while she brushed her teeth because she stated it normally occurred during her nighttime routine. That's when I heard it. Someone was walking upstairs. I could hear the footsteps start at the window in my parents' room and then travel away toward the other bedroom where my baby sister was. The noise was muffled until the footfall reached the landing of the stairs, when it increased louder because the landing was made of wood. You could hear the footsteps on the carpet again after a few steps when they got to my sister's room, but this time they didn't get all the way to the window. They stopped for a time at my sister's crib before going back to the window in my parents' room. I listened to this for 5 to 10 minutes. The footfall took about a minute to walk from the window to the crib and back. When my mom stepped out of the restroom, she remarked, "I told you I heard something." We opened the door and it stopped totally for the night, or at least that's what we think. I do the same thing the next night and hear it again. I open the door and let our dogs, a German Shepherd and a Border Collie, go up the stairs. They get to the top and then turn around and run down the steps. My stepdad was there that night, and as soon as the dogs came down, he went upstairs and looked everywhere. He looked everywhere, but there was nothing to be found and the windows were still locked. We couldn't explain it for years, and the neighbors who moved in after us said they heard the same footsteps.